Ladies and gentlemen, what have I been telling you since October of last year? I stated that the market is going to crash and tank. I predicted this in my Federalist article in October of last year. Please read the article in the pinned comment. I don't want anyone to lose money. Even the people who don't like me in politics, I don't want them to lose money. I don't want the country to suffer. I don't want people to not be able to feed their families and pay their rent or get laid off from work. I don't want inflation to go through the roof, 9%. It's actually more than that. I don't want a contracting GDP, which is what we have, contracted over 1%, 1.4%. Next quarter will be an official recession. We're heading into a recession with rising interest rates. The Dow is down 1,100 points today. The Nasdaq is down close to 700, 5% down. Nasdaq, Bitcoin, like I said, Bitcoin would tank. It is tanking, down $3,000 in one day. Cryptocurrencies mirror the stock market. And the stock market is tanking. Now, a circuit breaker goes off at 7% down. Today was down 3 to 4% in the Dow. But the Nasdaq is absolutely crushed. Getting crushed. It's going to go below 10,000, obviously. It'll eventually go below 10,000. Okay? And if you look at, or I should say, well, probably below 11,000. But if you look, because everything is going to get absolutely decimated. The Dow will get close to 20,000 again. And you have Bitcoin, I think, that'll probably get to 10,000. Hit subscribe to this channel. I have a very important live stream tonight. Very important live stream tonight on this crash. Now, if you say, well, it's not 10% or 7% and the circuit breakers haven't gone off. Ladies and gentlemen, we're heading towards not only a recession, a global recession. Everything I talked about in terms of the responses and the apoplectic, counterproductive, decision-making from maniacs that ended economic activity is taking place. Hit subscribe to this channel. Hit subscribe to the Stock Market Crash channel below. I have a very important segment on the Stock Market Crash channel. Hit subscribe there. I'll do a live stream also on that channel after my live stream on this channel. My live stream on this channel will be around 9 p.m. Pacific tonight. So be here at 9 p.m. Pacific tonight for the live stream on my main channel, H.A. Goodman. 9 p.m. Pacific. But you look, ladies and gentlemen, and this is like an absolute catastrophe. It's an absolute catastrophe for a number of reasons. So, Nasdaq over 5% down. And the Dow is, as I'm doing this, 1,112 points down. It's going to get worse. It's going to get to around 20,000 like it was in March of 2 years ago. And the Nasdaq's going to get crushed. S&P is going to get crushed. Bitcoin is going to descend to around 10,000. Let me tell you something. My predictions for where this index or where Bitcoin's going to be or the Dow or Nasdaq, it's like that I'm not 100% sure of. I'm not 100% sure of, you can't be certain of anything. But I was pretty certain I was predicting this crash. We're seeing the beginning of a devastating market collapse. Now, and I predicted this in October, why is this taking place? It's going to get worse. and much worse. Here are the reasons why. We have skyrocketing inflation because we ended economic activity. Absolute imbeciles made us end economic activity and then obsessed. Well, that's a whole, they'll never stop. But they said, well, if we end all the economic activity, it'll keep people happy and wonderful. And so that led to all the systemic injustices and the economic injustices and all of the crime and homelessness and people not being able to pay the rent and all the things that the left and wonderful progressives and morally superior liberal Democrats and all these, they're fighting against injustice as they're causing all of this. Bernie Sanders, AOC, Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, Democrats caused all of this almost entirely with never Trump Republicans. And the one thing President Trump did wrong was acquiesce and end the economy and agree to push for an end for about a month or two. But when he wanted to open up, the Washington Post, it's too soon. People are saying, well, gee, what does that have to do with 2 years ago? It has everything to do with 2 years ago. We're entering a recession because when you end, you don't even have to be an economist, okay? I'm not an economist, but I understand basic concepts and I understand economics. Like, you don't have to be a Nobel Prize winning economist. You end economic activity, supply and demand projections are completely obliterated. And so industries that rely on commodity-based industries, like oil and gas, which are geopolitical and strategic industries that mashed potato brains our president is just finding out, okay, their projections in terms of supply and demand are completely decimated. You can't have the demand completely plummet after, an economy that functions normally, demand for oil and gas completely plummet, that ruins and, destroys supply chains, ruins key industries. There's labor shortages now still in key industries. And so you go from a record-breaking economy with Trump. We had unemployment at close to record lows. It was still at record lows in January of 2 years ago. From January of 2 years ago to that March, it went from record lows in unemployment to 22 million people unemployed. Supply and demand projections for all of these industries were completely obliterated. Then you had $10 trillion pumped into the economy from fiscal and monetary stimulus to try to duplicate economic activity in a functioning economy. Then you had them turn on the economy like a light switch and say, oh, well, now you can work now. The experts have told you can work. Oh, gee, thanks, bureaucrats and experts and people who really just wanted to get Trump out of office. And people who got, like Andrew Cuomo, got Emmys for tanking their state's economy. And they're like, oh, Trump's last office, look at the deficit, No. These were major, big states, blue states, tanking their economies gleefully. Almost every state did. But none, more gleeful than, and longer than blue states in major cities. And so you had GDP completely, plummet, and then the stock market, and then you pump $10 trillion into the economy. We still had millions upon millions of jobs of people unemployed. People couldn't pay their rent, and then AOC says, eviction moratorium, you can't do this. And it's like, well, yes, I agree, but also you caused it because you prevented people from being able to work. And you said it was for their benefit. You said it was protecting them from working. Okay, so then you caused this when they say, well, Biden helped alleviate childhood poverty. Yeah, and Democrats caused it to get worse. The systemic injustices to get worse. The economic injustices to get worse because you prevented people from working for a year and a half. Then you said, oh, now you can work because we decided it's okay. Go look at the average age of the U.S. labor force, which is around 40 years old. And then you do the math on that in your head. You do the logic. I'm not going to go, we can't talk about those things here. You do the average age of the U.S. labor force is 40 years old. Okay? Now, and the average age of somebody who perished from you-know-what is what age? What age? What age? Okay, you shut down the entire economy. And you might say, well, you know what? You're going on and on. It's not even a crash. It's like, well, yeah, it's, even if it ends up today, which the market is it's always a racket, but it's a racket now more so than ever. Okay? And by the way, market goes up, but the volatility is not, there's two ways. Volatility in any market leads to one of two directions. Either it'll eventually just go back up because there's volatility that is leading to one scenario. Uncertainty now and optimism, or uncertainty now and extreme pessimism. Gee, where do you think it might go? We're heading towards a recession. We have $303 trillion in global debt. Inflation through the roof. Contracting GDP globally, not just here. A debt bubble in China that's pretty much already popped. Debt bubble here also. Derivatives nightmare in hedge funds. Most derivatives, or a lot of the derivatives in these hedge funds, aren't regulated. Okay, so with Dodd-Frank, some of them that caused the '08 collapse, like credit default swaps, they're regulated, but a lot of them are not. The ones that tanked Archegos are not. You have hedge funds now with $5 trillion in assets total, $5 trillion. You have $303 trillion in global debt. You have 9% inflation in the U.S., but it's much worse than that, according to Peter Schiff and others. Okay. You have a contracting GDP as they're increasing interest rates. How on earth? So the other day, the market went up 900 points. Now it's down 1,100 points. And you might say, well, it's not that big of a deal. Well, it's like, well, yeah, it is a big deal because right now they're just, all of these hedge funds and all of these gigantic investment banks, and they're just institutional investors and all of that. They're just making money now in terms of fees. And they're making money on the volatility. And the volatility is going to lead to, there's already extreme pessimism, so the volatility is going to go either up or down in an extreme manner. It's going to go down, unfortunately, and then you have derivatives. You have trillions upon trillions of dollars in derivatives, and you have hundreds of billions of dollars on margin. Well, yeah, probably trillions on margin globally, but maybe hundreds of billions, let's say, on margin. So Archegos, the hedge fund that went under, lost $20 billion in 2 days. The man that ran it had $20 billion lost in 2 days, and that led to $10 billion in banks. You say, well, banks are regulated, and they have to go ahead and abide by certain standards, and and FINRA and the SEC and the banking, the regulators make sure that banks don't collapse like in '08. Well, but they don't know how much debt, how much in loans they gave to the hedge funds. They don't know how much in loans they gave to the hedge funds. I mean, we'll talk about all of this tonight. Hit subscribe to this channel. Be here if you're 14 minutes in. Be here for the stock market crash channel live stream tonight, but also the live stream on this channel tonight at 9 p.m. So we don't know how. There's a derivatives nightmare, just like in 2008, and we don't know how much on margin these hedge funds have for risky derivatives that could tank their hedge funds when the market really collapses. And in terms of, and we don't know. And it's not the Dodd-Frank laws haven't been enacted to address how much margin these hedge funds have. You look in, and then there are margin requirements later this year. And then the new margin requirements for hedge funds later this year, they're going to have to use less margin and have to put up more capital, and the requirements for margin will be increased. And you have, which is really hilarious, this is about 10 years too late, you have Biden's administration, which is actually kind of a good thing, but it's like 10 years too late, them going after risky practices on Wall Street, like insider trades and, derivatives. And they're going after firms and investors, which is a good thing, but it's like a little bit too late, and it's like at the worst time now. So that'll cause more. I mean, there's never a bad time, but if there was ever a bad time for it, it would be now. So they're now, you have Biden's administration going after Wall Street, which is kind of hilarious because they created the moral hazard for all of this. Democrats created the moral hazard for all of this. And it started 2 years ago, which is why I spent so much time on that. We have a very difficult time in our country looking at things past 2 weeks earlier, like 2 weeks ago. If it's past 2 weeks ago, it's ancient history. And so people don't make the correlation between what's happening today and what happened 2 years ago. They don't make the correlation. Biden comes in wanting to save the planet and infrastructure. Well, that does nothing to help the average American. Like nothing. Because you don't know when the planet's going to end, and you can't say that everything you're doing now is going to specifically provide more time for the planet. It's all philosophical. It's like an ideology and philosophy. And yes, it's rooted in science, but at the same time, you're dealing with apocalyptic projections and prophecies from the people that actually most of their prophecies are entirely wrong. Everything Al Gore said didn't happen. Almost everything didn't happen. They said this is supposed to happen here, that's supposed to happen there. It didn't happen. But he invented the internet, so everything's fine. Anyway, you can't just, when you tanked your economy and then you have President Mashed Potato Brain saying, we're going to save the planet for future generations, like, well, what are you going to do to ensure that we get back to GDP growth? Well, we have contracting GDP. Next quarter, it'll be a recession. Then you'll have people still talking about on the left systemic injustices, not knowing they're creating all of these systemic injustices or making them worse or exacerbating all of them. We're heading into a recession. Democrats run the House, the Senate, and the executive. You think maybe it's their fault? You think just maybe? Because Trump has been out of office for 2 years, and The View blamed him for what happened to Dave Chappelle the other night. So the left or Democrats are like completely incapable of just basic logic. They're not good at like basic rational thought or logic. It's like unbelievable. It's absurd leaps of logic all the time. And they just like, their whole lives revolve around image. You see this person, they're obsessed over Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not a fan of Gazpacho Police. Not at all. But that's what they're obsessed over. Can you believe this? Can you believe that? This is the face of the Republican Party now. It's like, well, there's a recession. Do you not see? These are the same people who are like, economic injustices. There's a recession, rising inflation through the roof, and contracting economy, and the stock market's about to collapse, and there will be layoffs eventually. And again, you'll be pushing for an eviction moratorium because you slept through all of this. These people are like sleepwalking ideological zombies. They just sleepwalk through everything, yell and scream at the top of their lungs about everything, and don't realize that everything they touch turns to the fertilizer that's now 400 to 500% more expensive. You tanked the global economy, you tanked your economies because you listened to experts in multinational organizations and wonderful bureaucrats that you revered because they could serve as a foil to Trump. And you caused the recession we're about to experience. You caused the stock market crash. You caused the inflation that's skyrocketing that is a tax upon the poor. So you can pump as many checks as you want and feel so good about yourself, about giving money. But at the end of the day, see, they're like, we alleviated childhood poverty. No, you didn't. Because when inflation goes up, there goes your check. You give $1,000 check. You could give $1,000 check every month. Inflation goes up to 10 to 15%. That'll plunge all of those people back into poverty. This isn't rocket science. You don't have to be like Albert Einstein to understand this. Anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Be here tonight. I mean, and then we're not even talking about Bitcoin. People are gonna lose their behind on cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin's like the best one. But anyway, give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. This is a huge, 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 huge issue. And again, it's like, this was the work of people who wanted to just kick Trump out of office, who obsess over injustices and cause all the, catastrophes that they obsess over or exacerbate them. Give me your thoughts below. Hit subscribe right now. Be here for the live stream tonight around 9 p.m. Pacific time. It's going to be a very important live stream. I predicted all of this. I told people Clinton would lose to Trump. I've said a lot of things that took place. And that's one reason you should subscribe to this channel. Thank you so very, very much. Hit subscribe. Please share this segment. If you've lasted 21 minutes in, share this segment everywhere. Thank you.